Alex Mercer had seen his share of grisly crime scenes, but nothing prepared him for Ravenwood Manor. Nestled on the outskirts of Redwood Hills, the mansion stood as a silent sentinel against the encroaching darkness of the surrounding forest. Its ivy-covered walls whispered tales of a bygone era, now overshadowed by the presence of death. Mercer, a seasoned investigator with a keen intuition for the paranormal, arrived at the scene with his team in tow. Dr. Emily Thompson, a forensic psychologist with a pragmatic skepticism, accompanied him, her analytical mind a counterbalance to Mercer's instinctual approach. They were joined by Officer Jake Riley, a stoic lawman with a penchant for uncovering leads, and Sarah Collins, a tech-savvy investigator specializing in capturing paranormal phenomena. As they approached Ravenwood Manor, a cold breeze rustled through the ancient oaks that lined the path. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, ominous under the shadow of looming storm clouds. Inside the mansion, the scene awaited them, a tableau of horror that sent shivers down Mercer's spine. Fresh bodies, their forms contorted in agony, lay sprawled across the grand foyer. Blood splattered the ornate wallpaper, stark against the fading elegance of the Victorian era. Thompson, her expression guarded but curious, began her observations while Mercer surveyed the room, his gaze narrowing on the intricate patterns carved into the victim's flesh. Collins set up her surveillance equipment, her eyes scanning for any signs of paranormal activity as Riley secured the perimeter, his hand never straying far from his weapon. "This isn't just murder," Thompson murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something unnatural about this." Mercer nodded grimly, his mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to consider all angles. These symbols," he gestured to the markings, "suggest a ritualistic element." Collins, her fingers flying over the controls of her equipment, interrupted. "I'm picking up strange electromagnetic readings, and there's a temperature drop near the bodies." Riley, ever vigilant, scanned the shadows for any movement. "Could be residual energy from whatever happened here," he muttered, his voice tense. As they worked, the mansion seemed to groan with the weight of its secrets, the walls whispering tales of a dark history buried beneath layers of time and neglect. Outside, the storm intensified, rain beating against the mansion's windows with relentless fury. Thunder rumbled ominously in the distance, echoing the turmoil within Mercer's mind as he pieced together the puzzle before him. "Victims were locals," Riley reported, his voice breaking the silence that hung heavy in the room. "All linked to a recent land dispute over the manor." Mercer's brow furrowed in thought. Land dispute? Could there be a connection to the murders? Thompson, her gaze focused on the victims, offered a tentative hypothesis. Perhaps the manor holds more than just its physical presence. Local lore speaks of curses and restless spirits. Collins's surveillance footage captured flickering shadows and unexplained movements, adding to the tension in the room. "Whatever happened here," she said, her voice tinged with unease, "it's not just in the realm of the living." Mercer's jaw tightened with resolve. "We need to delve deeper into Ravenwood Manor's history. There's more to this place than meets the eye." As they prepared to leave, Mercer glanced back at the mansion's imposing facade, a silent vow passing between them. The investigation into Ravenwood Manor had only just begun, but already Mercer sensed they were on the precipice of something far more sinister, a nightmare that threatened to consume them all. The ghost hunter's nightmare had begun, and Mercer and his team were determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As the storm outside Ravenwood Manor intensified, Detective Alex Mercer and his team retreated to a local diner in Redwood Hills. The neon sign flickered in the downpour, casting an eerie glow over the deserted streets. Inside, Mercer and his colleagues gathered around a worn booth, seeking respite from the horrors they had witnessed. Emily Thompson sipped her coffee, her brow furrowed with concern. Ritualistic murders, symbols carved into flesh. "This isn't just a local dispute gone wrong," she mused, her voice thoughtful. "There's a pattern here, something deeper." Mercer nodded in agreement, his mind still grappling with the grisly scene at Ravenwood Manor. The symbols, They suggest a connection to the occult, he murmured, his gaze distant as he replayed the images in his mind. Sarah Collins, her laptop open in front of her, interjected. I've been analyzing the surveillance footage. There were anomalies, cold spots, electromagnetic disturbances. It's as if the mansion itself is alive with energy. Jake Riley, his usual stoic demeanor softened by concern, leaned forward. Local folklore talks about Ravenwood being haunted. Maybe there's more truth to those stories than we thought. The diner's owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Jenkins, approached their table with a tray of steaming food. Her eyes, lined with wrinkles but sharp with curiosity, lingered on Mercer and his team. You folks investigating Ravenwood Manor? She asked, her voice hushed. Mercer nodded, grateful for the distraction. We are. What can you tell us about the place? Mrs. Jenkins glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. Folks around here believe the manor's cursed. Built on sacred ground, they say. Strange things happen there. Voices in the night, shadows that move on their own. Thompson's interest was piqued. Have there been other incidents like what we saw tonight? The diner fell silent, the only sound the steady drumming of rain against the windows. Mrs. Jenkins hesitated, her gaze flickering towards the door as if afraid of being overheard. There have been disappearances, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. People who ventured too close to the manor and never came back. Mercer exchanged a glance with his team, a silent understanding passing between them. Do you know anyone who's had a recent interest in the manor? He asked, his voice low but insistent. Mrs. Jenkins nodded slowly, her expression troubled. Mayor Perkins, she confessed. He's been pushing for development in Redwood Hills, trying to get his hands on Ravenwood Manor for years. Riley's jaw tightened with suspicion. Could the murders be connected to the land dispute? He wondered aloud. Collins tapped away at her laptop, pulling up information on Mayor Perkins and his ties to local developers. Perkins has a history of shady dealings, she said, her voice tinged with disgust. If anyone stands to benefit from Ravenwood Manor's demise, it's him. Thompson, her mind racing with possibilities, leaned back in her seat. If the manor holds some kind of supernatural power, she mused, Perkins might be willing to do anything to gain control of it. Mercer's resolve hardened as he listened to his team's theories. We need to investigate Perkins and his connections, he declared, his voice firm. There's more to Ravenwood Manor than meets the eye, and I intend to uncover the truth. Outside, the storm continued to rage, lightning flashing across the sky like an omen. Mercer and his team knew they were up against forces far darker than they had imagined, a nightmare that threatened to engulf them all. As they finished their meal and prepared to leave, Mercer glanced out at the rain-soaked streets of Redwood Hills. The ghost hunter's nightmare had only just begun, and already they were embroiled in a battle against corruption, ancient curses, and the supernatural forces that lurked within Ravenwood Manor's haunted halls. The investigation into Ravenwood Manor led Detective Alex Mercer and his team down a labyrinthine path of deception and intrigue. Armed with newfound suspicions about Mayor Perkins and his connections to the occult, they set out to uncover the truth behind the grisly murders and the dark forces at play. Mercer, Thompson, Riley, and Collins gathered in a dimly lit conference room at the Redwood Hills Police Department. Outside, the storm had subsided, leaving the town shrouded in mist and uncertainty. Mercer paced the room, his mind racing with theories and unanswered questions. Mayor Perkins has been pushing for development around Ravenwood Manor for years, Collins began, her fingers tapping on a map spread out across the table. He's got ties to some shady characters, including a known occultist named Ezekiel Black. Thompson, her expression grave, flipped through files detailing Perkins's financial transactions and land acquisitions. If Perkins is involved in occult activities, she suggested, he may be using the manor as a conduit for dark rituals. Riley, his distrust of authority simmering beneath the surface, leaned forward. We need solid evidence, he insisted, his voice edged with frustration. Enough to bring Perkins and his cronies down for good. Mercer nodded in agreement, his gaze focused and determined. "We'll start by investigating Black," he declared, his tone leaving no room for argument. "If there's a connection between him, Perkins, and the murders at Ravenwood Manor, we'll find it." Their investigation led them to a rundown apartment on the outskirts of town, where Black was rumored to reside. The air was thick with the scent of decay and mildew as they climbed the creaking stairs to his door. Mercer knocked, his knuckles echoing in the silence that enveloped them. The door swung open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior cluttered with occult paraphernalia: candles, incense burners, and books on ancient rituals. Black, a gaunt figure with sunken eyes and a calculating demeanor, regarded them with wary suspicion. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice a gravelly whisper that sent shivers down Thompson's spine. Mercer, unfazed by Black's hostility, held up a warrant for his arrest. "We have reason to believe you're connected to the recent murders at Ravenwood Manor," he stated, his voice steady and commanding. Black's eyes narrowed, but he made no move to resist as Riley and Collins escorted him to a waiting police vehicle. Mercer and Thompson remained behind, searching Black's apartment for evidence linking him to Perkins and the occult activities surrounding the manor. In a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, they discovered a cache of documents detailing Black's involvement in dark rituals and his correspondence with Perkins. Mercer's blood ran cold as he read through the incriminating evidence, realizing they were on the brink of uncovering a conspiracy that reached far beyond Redwood Hills. Back at the police station, Mercer and his team pieced together the puzzle they had uncovered. Black's connections to Perkins and the occultist network painted a chilling picture of Ravenwood Manor's true purpose, a gateway to forbidden knowledge and unspeakable horrors. "We need to confront Perkins," Thompson urged, her voice urgent as she studied the evidence spread out before them. "Expose his involvement in the murders and the occult practices." Riley, his distrust of authority fueling his determination, nodded in agreement. "Let's bring him in," he suggested, his voice a low growl that mirrored the storm brewing outside. Mercer's jaw tightened with resolve. "Tonight," he declared, his gaze flickering towards Ravenwood Manor in the distance, "we end this nightmare once and for all." As they prepared to confront Perkins and expose his dark secrets, Mercer felt a sense of unease settle over him. The ghost hunter's nightmare had taken them deeper into darkness than they had imagined, but they were determined to see it through to the end, to uncover the truth and bring justice to the victims whose lives had been claimed by Ravenwood Manor's malevolent presence. The confrontation with Ezekiel Black had unearthed a tangled web of deception and occult intrigue surrounding Ravenwood Manor. As Detective Alex Mercer and his team closed in on Mayor Perkins, tensions in Redwood Hills reached a boiling point. Mercer, Thompson, Riley, and Collins gathered in a cramped office at the police station, poring over the evidence they had gathered against Perkins. Outside, the town was cloaked in an eerie silence, the aftermath of the storm leaving the streets slick with rain. "We have enough to bring Perkins in," Thompson stated, her voice tinged with determination as she tapped on her laptop, pulling up financial records and witness statements. "His connections to Black and the occult rituals at Ravenwood Manor are undeniable." Riley, his gaze hard and unyielding, clenched his fists in frustration. "We can't let him slip through our fingers," he insisted, his voice a low growl of righteous anger. "Not after what he's done." Mercer nodded in agreement, his mind racing with the weight of responsibility. "We need to move quickly," he declared, his voice firm. "Perkins won't go down without a fight, but we have the law on our side." Collins, her fingers flying over her tablet, intercepted a message from an anonymous source. "There's a meeting tonight," she revealed, her voice urgent. "Perkins and his associates, gathering at Ravenwood Manor." The revelation sent a chill down Mercer's spine. "They must be planning something," he murmured, his thoughts turning to the sinister forces that lurked within the mansion's walls. As night fell over Redwood Hills, Mercer and his team prepared for the final showdown. Armed with warrants and a steely resolve, they made their way to Ravenwood Manor, the air thick with anticipation and dread. Outside the mansion, shadows danced in the flickering light of their flashlights. The storm had passed, leaving behind an oppressive stillness that seemed to suffocate Mercer as he approached the mansion's imposing gates. Inside, Perkins and his cohorts were gathered in the grand hall, their faces illuminated by the glow of candlelight. Symbols and artifacts littered the room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "You can't stop us," Perkins sneered, his voice dripping with arrogance as he faced Mercer and his team. "Ravenwood Manor belongs to us now. The power it holds is beyond your comprehension." Mercer, undeterred by Perkins's bravado, held up the warrants for his arrest and the arrest of his associates. "Your reign of terror ends here," he declared, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. Riley, his hand on his weapon, stood ready to enforce the law. "You're under arrest," he stated, his voice a thunderous rebuke to Perkins's defiance. Thompson, her gaze unwavering, confronted Perkins with the evidence of his crimes. "We have witnesses, financial records," she stated, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You can't hide from the truth." Collins, her surveillance equipment capturing every moment, stood poised to expose any attempt at escape or retaliation. "It's over, Perkins," she warned, her voice tinged with triumph as she watched his composure falter. Perkins, cornered and outnumbered, realized the game was up. With a defeated sigh, he raised his hands in surrender, his arrogance replaced by resignation. Outside Ravenwood Manor, the night air was filled with the sound of rain falling softly on the pavement. Mercer and his team emerged victorious, Perkins and his cohorts in custody, the mansion's dark secrets laid bare for all to see. Back at the police station, they filed their reports and debriefed with their superiors. Redwood Hills would never be the same, but Mercer knew they had done what was necessary to bring justice to the victims and peace to the town. As they prepared to leave for the night, Mercer looked out at the quiet streets of Redwood Hills, a sense of closure settling over him. The ghost hunter's nightmare had come to an end, but he knew their journey into the supernatural was far from over. With Perkins behind bars and Ravenwood Manor sealed off, Mercer and his team turned their attention to the next case. A new mystery waiting to be solved, and new shadows waiting to be unveiled. With Mayor Perkins and his associates apprehended, Redwood Hills began to heal from the darkness that had shrouded it for so long. Detective Alex Mercer and his team, however, knew their work was far from over. The lingering specter of Ravenwood Manor and its malevolent influence weighed heavily on their minds as they prepared to confront the final remnants of the town's haunting past. Mercer, Thompson, Riley, and Collins gathered in Mercer's office at the police station, the walls lined with maps and photographs of the recent investigation. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the window blinds. "We've dismantled Perkins's operation," Mercer began, his voice measured and authoritative. "But there are still unanswered questions about Ravenwood Manor and the forces we encountered there." Thompson, her gaze fixed on the documents spread out before her, nodded in agreement. "The manor's history is filled with tragedy and malevolence," she mused, her voice tinged with unease. "We've barely scratched the surface." Riley, his expression grim with determination, clenched his fists on the table. "What about the families of the victims?" he demanded, his voice a low growl of righteous anger. "They deserve closure." Collins, her eyes flickering with the glow of her laptop screen, interjected. "I've been analyzing the surveillance footage from Ravenwood Manor," she revealed, her voice tinged with excitement. "There are anomalies, ghostly apparitions, unexplained shadows. The place is still teeming with supernatural energy." Mercer's jaw tightened with resolve. "We need to investigate further," he declared, his voice firm. "There may be more to Ravenwood Manor than even we realize." As they discussed their next steps, a call came in, a disturbance reported at the old cemetery on the outskirts of town. Mercer and his team exchanged glances, a silent agreement passing between them as they prepared to face whatever new horrors awaited. At the cemetery, the night air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss. Headstones loomed like silent sentinels in the darkness, their names weathered and faded with time. "We're not alone," Riley muttered, his hand resting on his holstered weapon as he scanned the shadows for movement. Thompson, her flashlight illuminating the worn path ahead, led the way through the rows of graves. "There's something here," she whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. Collins, her equipment at the ready, captured faint EVP readings and electromagnetic disturbances that hinted at a lingering presence. "Whatever happened here," she stated, her voice tinged with awe, "it left a mark on this place." Mercer, his senses heightened by the eerie stillness of the cemetery, approached a freshly disturbed grave. As he knelt beside it, he uncovered a worn photograph, a haunting portrait of a young woman, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. "This is the key," Thompson realized, her voice tinged with realization. "The portrait, it's a link to Ravenwood Manor." Collins, her expertise in paranormal phenomena guiding her, pieced together the puzzle. "The victims," she suggested, her voice steady despite the chill in the air. "Their deaths were tied to the manor's dark past." Riley, his resolve unshaken by the supernatural forces at play, drew his weapon and prepared to confront the lingering presence. "We can't let it claim more victims," he declared, his voice echoing through the cemetery like a vow. Together, Mercer and his team uncovered the truth buried within the cemetery's silent confines, a tale of betrayal, revenge, and restless spirits seeking justice. As dawn broke over Redwood Hills, they laid the portrait to rest, a symbol of closure for the souls lost to Ravenwood Manor's malevolent influence. Back at the police station, Mercer filed his final report on the ghost hunter's nightmare. The town was safe once more, its darkest secrets brought to light by his team's unwavering determination and courage. As they parted ways for the night, Mercer looked out at the quiet streets of Redwood Hills, a sense of peace settling over him. The ghost hunter's nightmare had come to an end, but he knew their journey into the supernatural was far from over. With Perkins behind bars and Ravenwood Manor sealed off, Mercer and his team turned their attention to the next case, a new mystery waiting to be solved, and new shadows waiting to be unveiled.